I was in the back office, surrounded by the smell of old paper and packing tape, when I heard the reporter ask the question. "So, what's the secret?" she said, her voice bright with admiration. "How does a small, independent bookstore thrive like this in the age of Amazon?" There was a pause. I could picture my dad, leaning against the oak counter, a proud, folksy smile on his face. And then he said it. The line that changed everything. He pointed to my brother, Leo, and said, "It's all heart. This young man right here, he is the soul of this place. He keeps the magic alive." The reporter scribbled furiously. "And Alara?" she asked. "What's her role?" My dad chuckled, a dismissive, airy sound. "Oh, Alara handles the computers, the back-end stuff. Necessary, I suppose." I had spent a decade building their entire digital empire from my tiny apartment. I designed the website, coded the inventory system, and grew their online sales by over 800%. That night, after they had toasted Leo's magic, I went home, opened my laptop, and deleted all of it. The next morning, their million-dollar back-end stuff had vanished into thin air. The bookstore, the last page, was my parents' third child, and arguably their favorite. It started as a passion project, a dusty, charming corner shop filled with second-hand classics, and the stubborn belief that a physical book was a sacred object. For the first 20 years, it was exactly that. A beloved, barely profitable local haunt. My brother Leo fit into that world perfectly. He was born with a book in one hand and a half-written poem in the other. He could talk for hours about obscure Russian literature, his voice a low, mesmerizing hum. He was the face of the last page. He was the one who charmed old ladies, hosted open mic poetry nights that were always packed, and curated the front window displays with an artist's touch. He was the soul of the store, and he never let anyone forget it. I was the ghost in the machine. While Leo was discussing Foucault with a college student, I was in the cramped windowless office in the back, negotiating with distributors for better wholesale prices. While he was arranging a display of vintage sci-fi, I was debugging the custom inventory management software I'd built from scratch because the off-the-shelf options were too expensive and inefficient. While he was getting his photo in the local paper for a community outreach event, I was awake until 3 a.m., fulfilling the surge of online orders that event generated. Orders that came through the e-commerce platform I single-handedly designed, built, and maintained. I didn't mind the work. I loved the store, too, in my own way. I loved the challenge of it, the complex puzzle of logistics, marketing, and finance. I loved knowing that my work was the silent, sturdy scaffolding that allowed Leo's magic to exist. I didn't need public praise or a feature in a magazine. I just needed to not be invisible. I needed my contribution to be seen as something more than back-end stuff. The simmering resentment wasn't a sudden fire. It was a slow, creeping mold. It grew in the quiet moments, the throwaway comments that piled up over the years. It was the time a customer gushed to Leo, "Your online store is incredible. My order arrived in 2 days, beautifully packaged." And Leo, without a flicker of hesitation, just smiled and said, "We do our best to make it special." He didn't say, "Oh, my sister Alara handles all of that. She's a genius." He just absorbed the compliment like a sponge as if he'd personally hand-wrapped the package and driven it to the post office. It was the weekly family dinners where my dad would spend 20 minutes praising a new, curated collection Leo had put on the front table, unaware that the selection was based on a sales velocity report I had generated, identifying micro-trends in our customer data. I tried to explain the algorithm, the way it predicted what our specific audience would want, and my mom would just pat my hand and say, "That's lovely, dear. Such a clever girl. Did you hear Leo's thinking of starting a podcast?" My work was alchemy, turning data and code into profit and survival. Theirs was performance. And performance always got the standing ovation. I remember the day I finally convinced them to invest in a new, high-speed label printer. It cost a few $100s, but I showed them the math. It would cut our shipping processing time by 60%, allowing us to handle more volume. My dad sighed, looking at the invoice like it was a personal betrayal. "That's a lot of money, Elara. That's 2 cases of first edition hardcovers we could have bought." The next day, Leo spent $1,000 of the store's money on a vintage, non-functional printing press to use as a decorative art piece near the entrance. My parents raved about it. "It adds so much character, doesn't it?" my mom cooed. "Leo just has an eye for these things." I was the foundation. He was the paint. And they were only interested in the color. For years, I swallowed it. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit, as long as the family business, our legacy, survived. I told myself my work spoke for itself, even if no one else was listening. But there's a limit to how long you can pour your life into something that refuses to acknowledge you exist. The final straw wasn't just a straw. It was an entire bale of hay. It was the interview with Metropolis Quarterly, a glossy magazine with regional prestige. They were doing a feature on legacy businesses that reinvented themselves. We were the star of the issue. The reporter, a shop woman named Clara, spent the whole day at the store. She loved the ambiance, the smell, the authentic vibe. She interviewed my parents about their founding vision. She spent an hour with Leo, who waxed lyrical about the narrative journey of the customer and the importance of tangible literary culture. He sounded brilliant. He was brilliant, at that. Clara saved me for last. We sat in the cramped office, surrounded by stacks of invoices and bubble mailers. "So," she began, "your parents tell me you're the tech wizard, the one who brought this place into the 21st century." For a fleeting moment, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this time. Maybe someone would finally get it. I started to explain my system. The integrated inventory, the automated email marketing funnels, the customer relationship management database I had built that tracked purchasing habits to offer personalized recommendations. I was talking about the server migration I had managed, the SEO strategy that put us on the first page of Google for independent bookstore in our state. Then my dad poked his head in. "Everything going okay in here?" he asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He glanced at my screen, full of code and analytics charts, and his face went blank. "Don't let her bore you with all the technical jargon, Clara," he said with a laugh. "It's all just back-end stuff. Necessary, but not the heart of the operation." He then beckoned them both out to the main floor. "Let me show you the rare book section Leo just acquired." And just like that, I was dismissed. Not just my work, but me. I was the boring technical jargon, the necessary but uninspired plumbing. He had demoted me from architect to janitor in a single sentence. I sat there, listening to their fading laughter and the soft, polite questions of the reporter as Leo showed her his latest find. The air in the office suddenly felt thin, suffocating. That was when the hope didn't just die. It shattered. And in its place, a cold, quiet, and utterly resolute clarity began to form. I didn't storm out. I didn't cry. I didn't yell about the 80-hour weeks I'd pulled during the holidays to ensure every single order went out on time. I just sat there for a minute, listening to the hum of the server that held their entire modern business. Then I typed a polite email to the reporter, Clara. Thank you for your time today. I've decided to pursue other opportunities and will be transitioning out of my role at the last page, effective immediately. I wish my family and the store all the best. I hit send. Then I tidied my desk, turned off the lights, and walked out the back door. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. What was the point? In their narrative, I was already gone. I drove home on autopilot, the city lights blurring into long, indifferent streaks. I didn't turn on the radio. I just let the silence in my car fill the space where my frustration used to be. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something heavier and, strangely, more peaceful. It was acceptance. They had shown me, in the clearest terms possible, exactly what I was worth to them, and I finally believed them. When I got to my apartment, I made a cup of tea, sat down at my desk, the same desk where I had built their digital salvation, and began the careful, methodical process of taking it apart. It was like a digital demolition in reverse. First, the e-commerce website. I logged in as the primary administrator, a credential only I had. I didn't just take it offline. I deleted the entire installation. All the product pages I'd meticulously written, the high-res photos I'd taken and edited, the custom CSS I'd coded to match the store's aesthetic. Gone. Next, the customer database. Over 50,000 contacts, complete with purchase histories and contact information. The lifeblood of our marketing. I exported a copy for my own records, not out of malice, but as a testament to my work. And then I hit delete. The server churned for a moment, and then a confirmation message. Database successfully dropped. Then came the third-party integrations, the automated shipping software, the email marketing platform, the cloud-based accounting system. All of them were under my personal accounts, paid for by my credit card. I went through them, one by one. Cancel subscription. Confirm. Cancel subscription. Confirm. The social media accounts, the Instagram with 100,000 followers I'd grown from scratch, the Facebook page that drove a third of our event traffic. I was the only admin. I deactivated them. The final and most critical piece was the inventory management software. It was the brain of the entire operation, the system that told them what they had, where it was, and what they needed to order. Without it, they were blind. It ran on a private server I leased. I logged into the hosting provider and terminated the account. I clicked the final confirmation button at 2:17 a.m. The silence in my apartment was absolute. I had built a kingdom for them, and then, in a few quiet hours, I had turned it back into a pumpkin. I finally went to bed, and for the first time in a decade, I slept without dreaming of spreadsheets and server errors. This wasn't an isolated incident, of course. My value being invisible was a family tradition. It started when we were kids. Leo would finger paint a messy, colorful blob, and my parents would frame it and hang it in the hallway, proclaiming him a young Picasso. I would spend a week building a functional, geared long-range catapult out of Legos in the garage, and my dad would glance at it and say, "That's neat, Alara. Just make sure you clean up all these little pieces before dinner." His creations were art. Mine were projects. His were to be admired. Mine were to be tidied up. In high school, he discovered theater and poetry. He was always on stage, bathed in the spotlight, receiving applause. I was on the math team and in the coding club. I won a state-level robotics competition my junior year. I came home with a trophy and a $500 prize. My mom hugged me and said, "Oh, that's wonderful, honey. We're so proud." Then she immediately turned to my dad and said, "Honey, we have to remember to get tickets for Leo's play on Friday. He has a monologue." My trophy ended up on a dusty shelf in my bedroom. The playbill from Leo's performance stayed on the refrigerator for 6 months. The dynamic solidified after college. Leo got a degree in philosophy and came home to find himself while working part-time at the bookstore. He lived with my parents, rent-free, for nearly a decade. They called it his creative incubation period. I got a degree in computer science and landed a grueling but high-paying job at a tech firm. I moved into my own apartment and started saving. The first time the bookstore almost went under, around 2015, was when a big chain bookstore opened 3 blocks away. Sales plummeted. My parents were in a quiet panic. I spent 3 weeks of my vacation time building them their first rudimentary website and online store. I used my savings to pay for a targeted ad campaign on social media. It worked. Online sales began to trickle, then pour in. It saved them. When I showed them the analytics, the clear data showing that online revenue was now covering the in-store shortfall, my dad just nodded slowly and said, "Well, I'll be. Good thinking, Alara." And then at dinner that night, he announced, "Leo's idea to host a local author spotlight has really brought a new energy to the store. It's that kind of creative thinking that will see us through." They had witnessed a miracle and given the credit to the wrong god. I never corrected them. I thought the results would speak for themselves. I learned that night that results don't speak. People do, and they will always tell the story that they prefer to believe. The first call came at 7:04 a.m. It was Leo. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came at 7:05 a.m. The third at 7:06. He wasn't the patient type. On the 8th call, I picked up, took a slow sip of my coffee, and said, "Hello?" "It's gone," he said, his voice a frantic, breathless squeak. "Everything is gone. The website, the Instagram. It's all just gone." "I know," I said calmly. "I took it down." There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him processing it, his brain failing to compute the sentence. "You? What? Why? Is this a hack? Were we hacked?" "No, Leo. It wasn't a hack. I logged in, and I deleted it." "Why the hell would you do that, Alara?" he finally shouted, the fear in his voice curdling into anger. "The magazine feature is coming out. We have hundreds of orders to fill. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking," I said, my voice dangerously even, "about what Dad said yesterday. To the reporter. About my work being back-end stuff. About you being the soul of the store. I figured if the digital infrastructure I built was so unimportant, so secondary to the magic, then you wouldn't miss it. Another silence. This one was heavier. I could hear my mom in the background, her voice a muffled, questioning squawk. "That's not what he meant," Leo said, his voice losing its bluster. "He was just... You know how he gets. He's proud of the idea of the store." "I'm sure he is," I said, "and you are the perfect embodiment of that idea. So, you handle it. The store still has its soul. It's just lost its brain and its central nervous system. I'm sure the magic will be enough to keep it going." "This is insane. You're sabotaging us. You're trying to destroy Dad's legacy." "No, Leo," I replied, the finality of it settling into my bones. "I'm not destroying it. I'm just not holding it up anymore. You told the world I never lifted a finger. I've just decided to make you honest." I could hear him start to say something else, something desperate and angry, but I pressed the end call button. I blocked his number. Then I blocked my mom's. Then my dad's. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd heard in a very long time. The fallout was, as I'd anticipated, immediate and chaotic. I knew they wouldn't have a clue where to even start. For 15 years, if a computer at the store so much as flickered, the solution was, call Elara. The website is slow? Call Elara. A customer can't log in? Call Elara. The printer is out of ink? Call Elara. I was their one woman, on call, unpaid IT department, marketing agency, and logistics chief. And I was now officially off the clock. Around noon, my Aunt Carol called. She was my mom's sister, a sensible woman I'd always liked. I decided to pick up. "Elara, honey, your mother is beside herself. She says you've destroyed the store's website." "Hi, Aunt Carol," I said, my tone pleasant. "I didn't destroy it. I just removed the parts I built and paid for." "But why? Leo said you went crazy." I took a deep breath. "Aunt Carol, yesterday, in front of a reporter, my own father described my decade of work as unimportant, back-end stuff, and gave Leo all the credit for the store's success. He erased me. So, I erased my work. It seems fair to me." She was quiet for a long moment. "Oh," she said finally. He said that?" "He did. And Mom and Leo stood right there and nodded. The magic was all that mattered, apparently. So now they have all the magic and none of the infrastructure. They can see how that works out for them." There was a sigh on the other end of the line. "I see," she said, her voice laced with a new understanding. "Your mother has a habit of romanticizing things, and your father follows her lead. I'm sorry, Elara. That's not right." It was the first time anyone in my family had validated my feelings in over a decade. It felt like a dam breaking. "Thank you for saying that," I said, my voice a little thick. "You take care of yourself, honey," she said before hanging up. They made their bed. Later that evening, there was a knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. It was my parents. My dad looked pale and grim. My mom looked like she'd been crying. I opened the door but blocked the entrance with my body. "Elara," my mom began, her voice trembling. "You have to fix this. This is your family's legacy." My legacy, I asked, raising an eyebrow. Yesterday you told the world my contribution was negligible. You can't have it both ways. You can't dismiss my work and demand it in the same breath. You know that's not what we meant, my dad interjected, his voice rising. It was a figure of speech. It was a figure of truth, I countered. It's what you actually believe. You believe Leo's charm is more valuable than my code. You believe his poetry nights are more important than the payroll I process. You believe the soul matters more than the systems that keep that soul from being evicted. You've made that clear for years. I just finally listened. This is childish, my mom cried. You're punishing us. No, I said, my voice cold and clear as glass. I'm not punishing you. I'm resigning. I am no longer the chief technical officer, head of logistics, and digital marketing manager for the last page. My position has been eliminated. You said it yourself. It was just back-end stuff. It shouldn't be too hard to replace. They stared at me, dumbfounded. It was as if the concept of me refusing, of me having a limit, was a foreign language they couldn't comprehend. So what are we supposed to do? My dad asked, his anger deflating into a helpless whine. I looked at him, then at my mom. I guess, I said, you'll have to ask the soul of the store for a solution. And then I closed the door in their shocked, uncomprehending faces. The Metropolis Quarterly article came out 2 weeks later. It was a glowing piece. The reporter, Clara, was a good writer. She painted a beautiful picture of a beloved family institution, bravely weathering the storms of modernity. She quoted my father's line about Leo being the heart and soul of the store. She described Leo's passion for literature in vivid, romantic terms. And my contribution? It was a single solitary sentence near the end. His sister, Elara, recently left her role handling the store's technical operations to pursue other opportunities. That was it. 15 years of my life, distilled into one sterile, dismissive line. It was a masterpiece of erasure. The irony was, by the time the article hit the stands, the empire it was praising was already a smoldering ruin. Without the website, their sales fell off a cliff. Without the inventory system, they had no idea what to order, leading to empty shelves of popular books and overflowing boxes of obscure ones nobody wanted. Without the customer database, they couldn't even send out an email blast to announce their new arrivals. Their social media presence, once a vibrant community hub, was a ghost town. They tried to get it back, but they couldn't prove ownership. Because I owned it. Leo, I heard through my aunt, had tried to build a new website himself using some cheap drag-and-drop service. The result was a clunky, amateurish mess that barely functioned and looked terrible. The glowing reviews on their business page were soon replaced by confused and angry one-star complaints. What happened to the website? I can't place an order. Used to love their shipping, but my last order never arrived. Is this place under new management? It's gone completely downhill. The magic, it turned out, couldn't process a credit card transaction. The soul couldn't manage a supply chain. The beautiful, romantic idea of the store was being starved to death by the ugly, boring reality of its own incompetence. A month after the incident, Leo showed up at my door. He looked awful. He'd lost weight, his hair was a mess, and he had dark, bruised-looking circles under his eyes. He wasn't the charming poet anymore. He looked like a haunted man. "We need to talk," he said, not even trying to force a smile. I stepped aside and let him in. He slumped onto my couch like a marionette with its strings cut. "They're going to sell it," he said, his voice flat. "The store! They can't make payroll next month. They're talking to a commercial real estate agent." I didn't say anything. I just sat in the chair opposite him and waited. "I tried," he said, looking at his hands. "I tried to fix it. I worked day and night. I called tech support people. They just kept asking questions I didn't know the answers to. About servers and domains and SSL certificates. It's all just a foreign language." "I know," I said quietly. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I didn't see arrogance or entitlement in his eyes. I saw pure, unadulterated panic. "How did you do it, Elara? How did you make it all work? It's not just computers, is it? It's a whole universe." "Yes," I said, "it is." "They never saw it," he whispered, more to himself than to me. "They never saw you. They just saw the lights were on. They never thought about the power plant." He finally looked me in the eye. "I didn't see it either. I was happy to be the one in the spotlight. I liked being the soul. It was easier. I let you do all the hard work, and I took the credit. I'm so sorry." It was the apology I had waited my entire life to hear. And when it came, it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt sad. "I know you did, Leo," I said. "But the apology doesn't fix it. The damage is done." "But you can fix it," he said, leaning forward, a desperate hope flickering in his eyes. "You can rebuild it. It would take time, but you could save it. You could save our family's legacy." I looked at my brother, truly looked at him, at the man who had effortlessly accepted praise for my labor, who had stood by silently while I was rendered invisible. And I felt a profound sense of pity, but not an ounce of obligation. "No, Leo," I said, and the words were calm and final. "I can't. That legacy isn't mine to save anymore. You are the soul of the store. You figure out how to give it a new body." My decision was never about revenge. It wasn't about watching them fail out of spite. It was about an act of radical self-preservation. For my entire life, I had been the family's silent partner, the invisible engine running in the background. My labor, my intellect, and my skills were treated like a utility, always available, endlessly reliable, and completely taken for granted until the day the power gets cut. The moment my father dismissed my life's work as back-end stuff, he wasn't just being careless. He was stating the family's core belief system. In their world, value was measured in visibility, in performance, in romantic gestures. The quiet, consistent, foundational work, the work that actually paid the bills and kept the dream alive, was worthless because it wasn't glamorous. Withdrawing my labor was not an act of destruction. It was an act of truth. I simply stopped holding up a structure that was crushing me. I allowed the natural consequences of their beliefs to unfold. If my work was truly unimportant, its absence should have been meaningless. The fact that its absence was catastrophic was the lesson. It was a lesson they could never have learned from my words, from my arguments, or from my pleading. They could only learn it from the deafening silence of a broken system. Some might call it a nuclear option, but when you're being systematically erased, sometimes the only way to prove you exist is to show them the size of the hole you leave behind. You cannot expect to be valued by people who have built their comfort on the foundation of your invisibility. The only person who can truly assign your worth is you. And sometimes that means walking away and letting the market correct itself. So, what do you think? Did I take it too far? Or was this a long overdue reckoning? Was I right to let their legacy crumble? Or should I have saved the family business, despite everything? I really want to know your thoughts. So, leave a comment down below. This experience taught me that your value isn't defined by the credit you get, but by the work you do and the standards you set for yourself. If you've ever felt unseen or unappreciated in your own life, whether it's at work or with your family, know that you're not alone, and you have more power than you think. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and taking back your power. Thanks for listening.